Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Cutting Through the Bullshit. I am your host, Dr. Stephanie Snyder, and I am a high performance mentor. Through my unique blend of strategy, mindset, and intuition, I help men and women to cut through the BS in order to create the life and business they desire. So, this topic idea came to me last night before I was falling asleep, and I remember thinking to myself, I need to get up and write this down somewhere so that I remember it tomorrow. And then I remembered this book that I had read once where it said, if you tell yourself you're going to forget people's names, you're going to forget their names. If you want to remember something, simply tell yourself that you'll remember it. And so last night, as I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep, this thought came to me and I said, you know what? I'm going to remember this. And so on my way to swim laps this morning after I dropped my kids off at school, walking into the gym, and I said, what was that thing that I wanted to remember last night that I told myself to? And it was, you can't win the lottery if you don't play. And I loved it because as someone who doesn't play the lottery, I can count on one hand how many times I've bought a lottery ticket. And I don't. It's never been something that I've been into. It feels too much like a gamble to me. And I don't like to gamble. Turns out, the reasoning behind this idea that had come to me was the power of intentionality. So on my social media yesterday, I had shared that the life that you want to create is not going to happen by accident. You don't accidentally win the lottery. Right? You don't accidentally become a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. You don't accidentally, whatever, X, Y, and Z, right? There is a level of intentionality that is required if you are going to do something you've never done before. So you can accidentally have life happen to you. Life can happen to you, and you can wake up 20 years from now and have no idea how it happened, and maybe you're happy with that, you're content with that. But if there is something that you are desiring to do that doesn't seem to happen on accident, you're gonna have to be intentional about things. And most of the things that we want in life are going to require us to be intentional. And one of my mentors, I was watching one of her teachings one day, and she was talking about the level of intentionality in her life. And my immediate response in that moment of where I was, oh my God, that's exhausting. It was exactly how I felt in that moment. Like, gross. Like, it was too much for me in that moment. But what it did was it actually activated me and caused me to look at where I was not being intentional in my life. Because the truth is, it took intentionality for her initially over time to become that version of her. And it wasn't this overwhelming kind of a thing. It was a day-by-day journey. And so what I like to equate it to is when I help my clients to create intentional living, to actually be mindful of the life that they're creating, we don't do it like a New Year's resolution where you write down 1,000,000 things and you start them all on day one. It's not how this works. It's not the best way to do it. It is a way to do it, not the best way that I've found to do it. And so being intentional means that you're choosing. It's not necessarily something that's automatic. It's not necessarily something that's ingrained. It's something that you are having to slow down and choose, because so much of our life is actually quite reactive. Our mind wants to make as many things as possible run on autopilot. This is why you can drive to work and not remember how you actually got there, because you were simply on autopilot. That's not intentional, but unfortunately that is a way that a lot of people spend their lives, is on autopilot. They do the same thing day in and day out, and then they wonder why nothing changes. Well, nothing changes because nothing changed. And so if you want something to actually change, you've got to actually get in there and play the game. If you want to win the lottery, you've got to play the lottery, right? Again, I'm not suggesting that we all go out and buy lottery tickets. I don't think that's a wise investment, but I'm not going to judge you if that's what you like to do. Okay. But what do I mean by this? I mean, you've got to know what actions you're taking. You've got to know what you want to create and then thereby take those actions. But this is where a lot of people get stuck, is on step one. What is it that they want to create? Some people come into this with the mindset that life just happens to them and they don't really have any power to create. I have to be honest, I was there at one point where I thought, okay, well, this all just happens to me. I'm just a victim of circumstances, kind of a thing, right? And then as I dove into these things, I actually realized that my response to everything is actually well within my power. Can I choose the circumstances that happen throughout the day? No, not always. But I have 1,000% control over the way that I respond to those situations. And thereby, I can choose to be intentional and change my response to those things, and thereby change the way that things are unfolding. Okay, so prime example. I'm going to write this down for you, give you a story, right? So let's say I'm going to use my youngest daughter as an example, okay? So, because sometimes it feels difficult to respond to children and we react kind of out of necessity, right? So, I remember a few years ago, my youngest was 4 or 5 probably. I think she was closer to 4. And we had gone to Five Below because my oldest daughter wanted to get something for her friend for her birthday or something, right? And when I take my kids out, sometimes I surprise them, but sometimes I give them very explicit kind of instructions for the day, right? Like, we're going to X, Y, and Z until about this time, and then we're going to go home and chill and whatever, right? Like, I just like to set the expectations for my kids. And so we were headed to Five Below, and I was walking out the door, and the 2 little ones said, "Hey, can we come with you?" And I said, "You can come, but only your sister is getting something for her friend. We're not buying a bunch of things at Five Below. This is not going to be a shopping spree, none of these things. Are you okay to come?" Yeah, we're fine. We just want to come, right? Okay, cool. So we go to Five Below, and my oldest daughter gets some things for her friend, and we're checking out, and my 4-year-old loses her mind at the checkout counter. Okay, I don't recall having one of my children throw a full-on tantrum like this before, but she absolutely lost her mind at checkout because I was not buying her something. Lost her mind, screaming, yelling. I scooped her up. She was kicking. Just lost her mind, right? And in that moment, I could have reacted, and I could have lost my mind as well in the store, and no one probably would have blamed me, because my child was losing her mind in the store. However, I scooped her up, and I remained ridiculously calm by the grace of God. And I thought to put her into her car seat. She was like arching her back. Just moving all kinds of crazy. I had to wrestle her into this car seat. And then once she was in the car seat, she just hit an all-time high pitch. She started screaming like a crazy person in the car, to which her older sister then started screaming because she was screaming so much it was hurting her ears. And so the 2 of them were screaming, and it was a lot. It was a lot. So I told the older one at that time, "Hey, stop yelling. She's going to settle down. It'll be fine," right? Well, she proceeded to scream all the way home, which was really like a 7-minute drive. It wasn't hours long, but proceeded to scream all the way home. And when we got home, the older two girls jumped out of the car. And my 4-year-old had finally started to calm herself down. And she said, "I'm so sorry, Mommy. I love you." And I thought, isn't that interesting? Isn't the way that I responded to this situation so different than it could have turned out? I could have gotten in that car and lost my shit on her. I could have screamed back at her. I could have done a number of different things. I could have lost her mind. And probably some other people would have been like, you know what, that's justifiable. Your child was losing it. I would have lost it too. However, I chose to respond differently to that situation, and the outcome was thereby different. By the time we got home, she was totally fine. She walked in the house like nothing had happened. It was interesting, right? And I was fine. I didn't respond. I didn't go off my rocker and then was angry at the whole house. I let her scream. Was it uncomfortable? Absolutely, it was uncomfortable. Because every part of me wanted to scream back at her. And I didn't. But by moving through that uncomfortableness, I got a different outcome. And that's what happens in this intentional. When you are actually taking action, it's going to feel uncomfortable at first because it's not autopilot. And when it's not autopilot, it requires intentionality. Eventually, that different level of intentionality will become your new autopilot. Right? It's like if one of the road closes on the way to work, all of a sudden you're taking this other route. It requires you to be intentional to remember the other route, but then eventually that becomes second nature because you've taken this second route so many times. It's the same thing in our lives. It's going to take exhausting, I use air quotes here, it's going to take a bit more energy in the beginning because it's different, but then it becomes autopilot. And then it doesn't take that much energy. And then you can look at a different area of your life and you can shift that one too. I always like to equate this to working out. Most of my listeners are fitness people, and when you start a new workout routine, it's uncomfortable at first. Because you're like, okay, well, how long is this workout going to take me? All right, 45 minutes. So I need to wake up at such and such time so that I have time to do the workout and then do this and then do that. It takes a couple of weeks for you to realize what that workout routine is and you to figure out which way it's going to work best for you. But then it's on autopilot, right? I think week 7 or 8 in my new workout plan. I'm doing a long-term training for triathlons. So I have swim, bike, and run every week. Basically the same workouts every week. But it's taken me several weeks to get into the groove of, okay, what day works best for this versus that versus this versus that, right? Tuesday and Friday are my swim days because I get to come home and wash my hair, get all the chlorine out, and then I record my YouTube and my podcast on Tuesdays. So it works for that, right? For the first couple of weeks, I was like, shoot, I don't even know what day I should swim. And so it required some intentionality there to figure out, okay, what works best those days. Now that I'm several weeks into it, it's almost on autopilot. I haven't fully gotten a handle on the weekends because we've got soccer games and all kinds of things, right? But Monday through Friday, I know what my workouts are going to look like. I may have to chalk up weekends to just whatever I can get in, right? But I know Monday through Friday, these are the workouts that I'm going to be doing. This is my routine. It was uncomfortable in the beginning, and it took intentionality, but now it's on autopilot. I don't even have to think about it. And so when it comes to creating whatever it is that you want in your life, you've first got to get very specific about what it is that you want. And then 2, the actions to get there, the action steps are probably pretty simple, but we've probably overcomplicated it for a number of different reasons, right? Another example of this is when you start to eat differently. Our eating is habitual. We don't want to think about what we have to eat. And so oftentimes we eat the same thing every day. Every week. We have the same kind of thing for dinner every week, right? It's on autopilot. So if you want to change your eating, 1, you've got to get aware of how you're eating first. And then start with 1 simple change. Don't try to overhaul it all. Doesn't always work for people. They do a good job for 3 weeks and then they totally regress, right? Like it doesn't. 1 simple thing, right? Maybe that's you eat more vegetables. That's a great place to start, in all honesty. If you add more vegetables into your day, that's going to be a great place to start. And I'll never forget, rather. I always remember that when I was first starting all of this personal development stuff, years ago, God, probably, 12 years ago, was when I was consciously aware of all of the things. I was starting this nutrition program. It was through Beachbody. It was called 21 Day Fix. Many of you are probably familiar with it. It had all these different color-coded containers. And I remember when I got to this program, I was super skeptical because I was like, there's no way that people are losing 7 to 10 pounds in 21 days. That's ridiculous, right? Like whatever it was. I said, but you know what? I'm going to do a little experiment here and I'm going to give this a try and see what happens. And so I took out this little booklet that had all the approved foods in it. And I said, well, I'm not going to do anything crazy because I know if I try to incorporate all of these foods that I don't actually like, I'm never going to do this. So what I did with the booklet was I opened it and I highlighted all of the food I knew I already liked. And that's where I started. I ate that food. And you know what? In 3 weeks, while I didn't lose 10 pounds, I lost a couple pounds, but I trimmed out the carb stomach that I had. Like the bloatedness had started to go away and other people noticed it. I was like, oh, cool, this is kind of fun. Let's try another experiment, right? When you take the pressure off of yourself and you try this new thing as an experiment, it's probably going to be fun. Instead of like this do or die when we go into something, I have to do this or I'm going to be da da. No, like just have a little experiment. Have fun with it. So when you're starting to create this intention, whatever area it is, okay? 1, where do you want to go? How do you want to get there? And have a little bit of fun with it. Right? Let's say that you want to change your spending habits. Well, get aware of where your money's going. First and foremost, because you can't change spending habits if you don't actually know where your money's going. Figure out where your money's going, then go, oh, actually, I would prefer to spend money here instead of there. And then all of a sudden you're responding instead of reacting, which is giving you the ability to actually create the life that you want. Huh. Isn't that interesting? All right, I'm going to leave it on that note. It just feels right. So I'm sending you so much love. If you do have questions about working with me, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, Stephanie Snyder, Ph.D. You can head over to my website, stephaniesnyderphd.com. I am currently taking private clients. So if that's something that you're interested in, please, again, don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you do have questions or you have a question about one of these episodes, you want me to expand on it a little bit, I am happy to help. You can always leave comments below in the YouTube channel as well. And the podcast, if you want to share that on Instagram that you've taken a listen, I would love that. Totally appreciate it. And as always, be you because the world needs more of you. Bye, love.